Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Anyway Whatever podcast. I'm your host, Mike Fisher, and today's guest is Chet Zar. Chet is a painter and an artist, and I've been a huge fan of Chet's work forever. He is a master painter and very successful in the LA gallery scene in the dark art genre. That we talk a little bit about that and all the things that may or may not encompass. And Chet has a podcast called the Dark Art Society podcast. And so for this show, he's going to air this episode on his as edited. And also I'm going to put it on mine as edited. And we're going to, do like a little crossover. We've been friends online for a long time, and it was really cool to get to like sit and chat with him, kind of in person, as in person as things can be these days. Chet's a cool guy. I think people are really going to like sitting and listening to him talk. It's funny that we didn't talk about our art a ton. We kind of just talked about life and, what it's like being an artist, other American artists, and, things that we were influenced by, where we draw inspiration from the time we were growing up all the way up until adults. It's a really cool conversation between two professional working artists who kind of work in a little different fields of art. So really cool. I think people are going to find value in this just from a point of view of listening to a couple of people talk about something that means that is their whole life, which is art for me and Chet. As always, if you are listening to this podcast, you can give us a review and a like wherever it is you get your podcast content. If you are watching the YouTube version, subscribe, click the bell, like, share, comment. That kind of stuff is very helpful to the growth of the show. We also now have a Patreon, which is also helping me grow the show. And things are happening for sure. The algorithm is picking up on the show, and we're starting to see a much greater audience growth really rapidly right now. So I appreciate all of the support people give to my podcast, and it'll be cool for you guys to get hear about Chet's podcast and his audience to hear about mine. And, we have merch in the description below, shirts from Warlord Clothing. If you are interested in the gear I use to make this show, there's a link down below to all of my camera, my microphones, like everything I use. And once again, I do appreciate the support. Check out this talk with Chet Zar. He's a really cool guy. And I think that my audience will really, really like him and what he's got going on. If you are not already familiar with who he is, because he's a pretty famous artist. Anyway, check out me and Chet on the other side of this funky track.
Cool. Okay. So you're recording the whole thing. So as long as you, even if it's not stereo, whatever, it doesn't really matter to me. So it's normally,
sounds good.
I've got them panned slightly to each side, but I did one time I had to do, the only way I could get Derek Hess on was to do a phone interview. So I had to get like this crappy software from my cell phone. And then it was like, one track and it sounded all tinny, but I don't care. I mean,
I owe Derek Hess like a lot. Back in the time when gigposters.com was active, he came on there, and me and him developed like a little bit of like a rapport. And then when he stopped doing rock posters, he did all that shit for the Gore Theater in Ohio. Mm-hmm. And then he just had his manager, Marty, he's like, well, just start giving all that shit to Fisher. And I was like, what the fuck? And so I see he like gifted me his Gig Posters gig.
Wow.
And then that didn't really it didn't last too long, but Marty saw that like I was super reliable and that my work was cool. And he started hooking me up with all the merch companies. And that's how I become a t-shirt designer. It's like Marty
killer.
hit Derek's. It was like, I don't have the last 15 years of my career without Frank Kozik and Derek Hess.
Yeah. You ever talk to him? You ever talk to Derek Hess anymore?
I haven't. I haven't.
He seems like a super recluse. I mean, especially after interviewing him, he was like, basically, yeah. I was like, thanks for taking the time. He's like, I'm just sitting here watching TV anyway.
That's amazing. I still talk to Marty, his manager, all the time.
Oh yeah.
You know, speaking of that, even, and as far as I'm concerned, we can be going with the episode right now.
Yeah. Whenever I'm good whenever you are.
And also as it pertains to Derek and Marty was that, the Grammy Museum here in Los Angeles did a Golden Gods of Heavy Metal exhibit. And like the woman who put it together was Marty's intern. And so like, I just got a call one day and she's like, oh, Marty Jeremito was like, said that you do these cool heavy metal, like rock posters. And I'm doing this exhibit. And like, you know, all the posters that are on the wall next to me that you can kind of see, those were all hanging in the Grammy Museum, thanks to Marty and Derek. Yeah. And like, you know, that was one of those moments where I was like, with my mom, my mom was like, a museum? Like this all led you to being in, not a gallery, but a museum. And I was all, yeah. And she's like, well, I'm sorry. I take back everything I said about you sitting around drawing skulls and monsters when you were a kid and how nobody would ever care.
Hey, it just goes to show, man. It goes to show how important connections and networking is. And it also goes to show how important just like sticking with it.
Yeah. I mean, you got to do what's inside of you, you know, like, you know, and I think that's like an important thing is like, like people ask me, you know, like, how did you, you know, like you've been doing this for like 35 years. Like, how did you get where you are? And I'm like, I never gave up on it. Like when I was 15 and I started my first band, so I would have a band to make art for, because that's all I wanted to do was like make art for punk rock bands. I had a plan and like I just never gave up on it. Like I've told this story on my show before, but what I would do in the San Francisco Bay Area is like a band would be coming through 7 Seconds or Aggression or one of the big hardcore bands of like the mid 80s. I got like a speedball screen printing kit and I would make like bootleg t-shirts of the band. I would sell them out in front to get enough money to get in. And then I'd go around, find where the bands were out back, and I would just give them the rest and be like, sell these for your own. And so I developed relationships with bands. And I learned how to be a professional artist when I was like 15 years old.
Yeah, that shows initiative. You know, you got to have that initiative. Got to be willing to do. That's what I always say in my podcast. It's like I was willing to do whatever it took. You know, it was like failure was not an option. Right. So I was going to do all the uncomfortable things I didn't want to do, like learn to talk to people and go to shows and network and business stuff. It's like, you know, you can do it if you're willing to do whatever it takes. I mean, not killing people, but
I mean, you know,
but you know, all the other stuff.
Yeah. I've heard you talk a little bit on your podcast before about how like you were like, I had to like make myself go out to shows. Like, I feel like you kind of even have said before that you still have to kind of make yourself go out to shows sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, thing, man,
I don't know. It's not so bad now. I mean, I've kind of gotten past that part of myself that was, you know, uncomfortable in crowds. It's like I'm not comfortable in crowds, but I'm not uncomfortable like I used to be in crowds. And especially at shows, it's like everybody knows me now. It's like, you know, it's where the only social life I have other than the podcast, pretty much. So
it must have been a weird year for you that with the coronavirus stuff to not be able to have any shows where you could like actually go out and be around people.
It was, you know, it's like, I hate, are we recording?
Yeah.
Okay. I hate saying it because it sounds so callous, but for me, it was like, I don't have to worry about going anywhere. I don't have to worry about, going out, because it's like every time I go to a show, it's like once I get there, I'm like, oh, this is fun. Or at the end of the night, I'm glad I went. I'm glad I went. That was fun, enjoyable. But it's so hard to get me out the door. It's just like every time, no matter how great the show is, I'm just like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I'm just such a homebody. I really am like totally comfortable being at home with my wife and just chilling in the studio. That's
100%. I identify with that exact feeling. It's like, even for me, like for years, like I started playing ice hockey when I was like 7 years old, and I was a goalie like for over 40 years. And a year ago, almost exactly, I blew out my knee, which is the first knee injury I ever had, which is crazy in 40 years. And then I was like, I wasn't able to play. And then the coronavirus thing happened. And then there was no way to play. And so like I had a whole year off. And it's the first time in my life where I was like, that was my social interaction. It was like,
right.
I would go out and I'd play hockey once a week. It put me in a room with other people where I had to socialize. But I didn't even want to get up and do that. Like every week I was like, oh, I don't want to go. Like, I don't
It's like
it's
like exercise. You have to make yourself do it. You know what I mean? It's like you have to make yourself have interactions with people and be social. It's like it's good for your mental health.
Like I won't go to shows if my wife doesn't go with me. Like I can't go to like an art show or like a live show without my wife going with me. Just for that same reason. It's like, like I'm uncomfortable and I don't want to go do this. And then when I get there, I'm always like, oh, I'm so glad I came and did this. Like I'm having fun. And oh, look, there's people I know here. I'm having fun.
Right.
Imagine
Yeah.
that. I'm not, sitting around working on something. Cause that's like the thing that happens. And it's a common thread with other artists that I have on this show is it's like, we tend to be the kind of people who always work. Like, like even if I'm not working, my brain is working on something, like, and if I lived 100 lifetimes, I couldn't get all of the projects that are in my mind done. All the things I want to do with my life. I would start over and be a chef, and then I would start over and I would be just a painter, and then I'd start over and I would, I'd be an actor or a stand-up comic or some other fucking thing, and it's like,
that shows in what you do. I mean, you do so many different things. I mean, you're like a jack of all trades type of guy for sure.
Well, at some point I realized that I was going to trade in having like a one name notoriety, as an artist, like a Kozik or Warhol or what, you know what I mean? Like by trying to do as many things as I could to keep paying all my bills.
Right.
Like I said, I was in video games for like 15 years as an art director, and that's how I afforded to raise my family. But I always just wanted to make my own art on the side, like rock art. I always did like the rock posters and merch design and stuff and album covers on the side.
That's like me and makeup effects. That's like me and makeup effects. Same thing.
We have a lot of parallels in our lives, I've noticed. But then at some point when my kids were, when all my kids were old enough that I did not have to completely support like, an entire family's worth of income. I quit the games industry and I was like, okay, you're going to focus on being a painter. Cause that's what I would really like to do. But I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't good enough at it to sell paintings for enough money to make it my entire living. And so I had to like triple down on all the other things I did and try to stay away from having a day job by doing as many things as I could.
Right.
So far it's worked. I've been over 10 years with no real job.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best, but I mean, that's a good example of doing what it takes. Maybe you wanted it a little more this way where you wanted to be a painter but it's like, I see a path this way. It's not, totally what I wanted, but I want to not have a day job and I want to be making art for my living. So I'm going to do that. It's just like, I want to just be a painter that paints and the gallery deals with everything else. And I just sit and paint. And it's like, I could never afford to do it. I couldn't afford to make a living just selling originals. So I had to get into the print business and merchandising, just, all about that. So it's like, I didn't want to do that. And, it's not really the way I enjoy spending my time. I try and, I try and enjoy the marketing of it. I make do, and I'm like, okay, I can try and have fun with making little flyers to post online, and analyzing my sales to some degree and stuff like that. But it's like, I don't want to do that shit, but it's what it takes. So I do it.
How long were you in effects before you were able to kind of get out of that show?
I always say a different number, but I graduated high school in 85.
Mm-hmm.
I took like a year where I didn't do anything. I was just a bum. And then I got a job, but I did like little side things. So even in 85, I worked on a movie, like helping this friend of mine, my brother's friend who was in college, Jim Beinke, who I've had on my show. I helped him work on a movie called Nomads, this really weird low budget horror movie. And so, I mean, 85, and then I got out, I left. Okay. Now I have to look it up. I don't know why I can't remember it. Okay. The last movie I worked at where I was full time was Land of the Lost remake.
Oh, wow.
And that was, I think, 2010. Let's see, 2009. So what is let's say 86 to 2009. That's 86.
It's like 13 years.
Is that,
No.
yeah.
It's longer than that.
86,
No.
96, 2006, 2016 would be.
Clearly, we are true artists, and we have no math skills.
A long time.
Both of our gears are sitting here just like grinding. Smoke
but
pouring out.
Even after I got out, I would freelance.
Sure.
I do some sculpting here and there. I worked on, I think, Hansel and Gretel, that movie Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah, your sculptures are fantastic, dude.
Thanks. Yeah, that's what I was doing most of the time in effects. So, compared to oil painting, sculpting is just like, it's so easy. I mean, it's like, when you do something 40 hours a week, one thing over and over, 40 hours a week for 15 years or whatever, it's just like, becomes second nature. So oil painting is fun because it's still challenging. Whereas sculpture is like, I know how. I never look at a sculpture and like, how could they do that? It's like, I know how they do that. I know how to do it. It's, might be tedious or whatever, a pain in the ass, but it's like, I can do it. Oil painting, I look at oil paintings and I'm like, how did they do that? Because it's a lot more difficult, I guess, because I didn't start painting until I was like 33. So, but I was sculpting in high school,
That's crazy that you started painting so late.
Yeah,
how
I know
good your paintings are.
Well, it's like, I thank you, but I was drawing since I was little. That was always my thing. I'm sure you were the same way, just always drawing. And then, as drawing was always there throughout my, effects career, my whole life, really. That was always there. So I was always trying to get better at drawing. And, in effects, I would also, I learned I would do designs for creatures, and sometimes I would paint them. And then I got into Photoshop, and then I would paint in Photoshop. So I was always developing those basically painting skills without actually painting. And I would do like, I'm sure you did this too in high school. You do like, I'm going to try oil paints out. And you do like, so you get like here and there, you get little opportunities to get a feel for the media and stuff. So, it wasn't like I didn't have any background and then I started painting. It was like I did have a background. I just wasn't an oil painter.
Yeah, I mean, just being able to sculpt something three-dimensional will give you an understanding of how to bring shapes out of something. And so there was a lot of crossover skill there.
Huge. Yeah. And also, I didn't go to art school, so there wasn't anatomy studies.
Neither did I.
Yeah. But I was working on faces every day or heads, and there was body casts, and there was, anatomy charts everywhere. So it's like I had this education in pretty much all of the traditional fine art skills, other than like composition, maybe a few things here and there that didn't apply to makeup effects, but everything else like color theory and form and blah blah balance and this and that. It was all, I had like this amazing education, like a 15-year education in a way,
Yeah,
on the
that's
job
awesome. I
training.
have a few friends who are in effects. I mean, if you're in Los Angeles, you get friends that are in all parts of the industry over the course of time. But I'm actually had one of my friends, Caleb Schneider, who's
Oh,
in
I know
effect.
Caleb. I worked with
Yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah. Caleb was
He's a
on the
great bass
show.
player. He's a great bass
Yeah,
player.
oof. Working on. I did the last cover for Bad Acid Trip, his main band, and I'm gonna start working on the new cover for the next record. We were supposed to start it like right when COVID happened, and then kind of that slowed down. But I have like a custom resin molded figure. It's like it's like the Eye of Providence, but
Mm-hmm. Oh
instead
yeah,
of the
I've
inside
seen
is
it.
like it's like skull. Caleb sculpted and molded those for me.
Oh, cool.
In the first batch, and then they went to Kozik at Happy Plastics, and he published like a full like run of those through his Kozik Happy Plastics stuff. But yeah, Caleb's working on the next version because we did the triangle, and then we did one that was a coffin that had like kind of an elongated skull face in it.
So
And
cool.
now
Great
we're
idea.
working on the third one of those pieces right now. I think he's literally working on it right now.
Oh wow.
Actually.
Well, tell him I said hi when you see him.
I will do. He might be the nicest person I know. I know
He's
a lot
so
of
nice.
really nice people, but
He's
Caleb,
super nice.
My
He's super
wife
nice.
loves that guy. She's like, oh man, like you have a lot of really cool, nice friends, but I swear to God, that Caleb, he is so nice.
Well, this is something I talk about on my podcast a lot, is how well, maybe I haven't talked about it in a while. I just talked about it in a written interview I did for a blog. How the people that are into monsters and dark art are like so much nicer than regular people. It's like they're the nicest people for the most part. That seems to be my experience.
It's the same thing with the death metal people. Like
right.
all of my friends who are in like major death metal bands are the funniest, nicest people in my friend group. Like without question. And it's the band that I was in was made up of a bunch of guys who were in death metal bands who wanted to be in who wanted to do a punk project. And so, we would play with death metal bands all the time, and we'd tour, and we'd, and like everywhere you went, it was like, obviously I knew a bunch of people before, but like if I went someplace where like a scene I didn't know, like Pittsburgh, and it's like, I don't know what the people in Pittsburgh are like.
Right.
Everybody's the nicest people ever. Like, and I kind of noticed that about punk rock when I was a kid, where I was like, oh, these people look intimidating. And then I got around and I was like, oh, they're just like nice, normal people.
Yeah. Yeah. If anything, they're I don't know, nicer than average.
Yeah. I mean, my big letdown about punk rock though was that, it ended up being the same kind of bullshit society that I was trying to get away from.
Oh
like
yeah,
every shit. It's like, oh, you don't have Doc Martens.
Every real punk feels that way. You know what I mean? That's like that. Totally. That was that's what Mike Watt has said that often. That it's like the whole back. And I've heard a lot of other bands from back in the day say that it was like, the punk scene was not about sounding a certain way. It was like about having your own sound and sounding totally different and still being able to do it, and your own look and everything. And then it just became like everything that gets co-opted. It became like a uniform. And I mean, but really before it got co-opted, it did, it got kind of militant, and it got like where it's all one sound. And, it's like what a lot of people think of as punk rock now, the sound, like a hardcore punk sound, is like one part of what came out of punk. You listen to Mike Watt stuff now, it's like I don't even know how to categorize it. It's so different than anything.
Well, the Minutemen, his band from the 80s, they didn't sound like any other.
No.
There was no other punk band that sounded like them. And one of the things about the Minutemen for me was like, when you're young and you're, when you get into something, it's really easy to be myopic about it. Like, oh, I only want it to be this one thing. And it's like, my first bands were like Circle Jerks, Black Flag, Dead Kennedys. And so if it wasn't super fast and sounding in that same way, I was like, this isn't for me. And so there was a bunch of bands that I skipped for a long time. And Minutemen were one of those bands where I was like, no, this isn't speaking to me at all. Yeah. But they were always on the same bill as all of the other bands I always
Yep.
wanted to see. And they were always, and now as I grew older and was able to like broaden my horizons and listen to the Minutemen, I was like, God damn it. They were like, they were on some totally different wavelength than everybody else. But then they were in the same scene. And yeah,
I know. It was a lot of those
totally.
SST bands were like that. Just
Yeah, well, Greg Ginn is
Meat.
such a weird dude. Like, you
Yeah,
never, you know.
Meat. Yeah, right. But Meat Puppets and
Mhm.
Minutemen and Black Flag and Husker Du, and it's like, everyone had their. I mean, that's the way it should be. Everyone has their own thing,
Right. Agreed. I totally
And even
agree.
the Dead Kennedys, that's the band. That was the band that got me into punk rock. It was the Dead Kennedys. And because I remember punk rock in the 70s when I was a little kid, and the older kids in the neighborhood, there was a couple of like smart kids that were into punk. And I remember being a little kid being like, that's dumb. That's stupid. It's like, it was just like, it seems so, I didn't get it, so I kind of.
You're influenced by other people. And at the time, there was a big backlash against disco and punk.
Right.
Rock and roll radio was like, we don't want anything to do with any of this.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And my older brother was like a rock guy, 70s rock guitar guy, guitar player, and all that. So I was like, I was getting the influence from him, even though he got me into Devo in the 70s, which was kind of cool.
That was my entry point.
Oh, really?
Devo was my entry point. I saw Devo on Saturday Night Live because my parents.
Yeah, me too. I saw that.
I wouldn't say my parents were liberal, but they definitely had they were very liberal with like my intake of, I was allowed to read any book I wanted.
Oh, how cool.
And like they didn't really have a bedtime for me because they knew I was the type of kid who'd go to bed when I was tired.
Right.
And so I stayed up, when I was like in the 70s, when I was, because I was born in 69. So I turned 10 in 1980. And so even like through like between like 77 and 80, like I stayed up and watched Creature Feature, double features like every Friday night. And I watched Saturday Night Live every Saturday.
Yeah. Same here.
And I remember that Devo episode and I was like, wow, this is like super interesting. Like,
like even as a kid, you're like, this, it grabbed you. It really was like, made you stop and look.
It was so much weirder than everything else that was going on.
Yeah. If you think about the time period, what was happening, they were like, they're still weird. You look back at those old videos and they're still weird, but back then it was like really weird. I remember seeing, somehow I saw on like, what was that show? I don't know if it was Midnight Special or Don Kirshner's rock concert or something. And they did a live set on there. I think it was, I don't know. I think it's Don Kirshner's rock concert. Maybe.
Yeah. I know it's what you're talking about, but yeah.
But they did a live set and then they would play their videos, all these other videos that you'd never seen before.
There was no MTV yet.
Yeah. And it was just like, it completely changed everything for me. I started like trying to make movies, like Super 8 films, and based on their little videos, because I just like, for some reason I was like, I want to make stuff like that. It's so cool. Completely made me a lifelong fan.
Yeah, I am too. And then and right around the same time, a little bit after that, I started listening to the Dr. Demento show.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah.
And so there was a lot of like punky and new wavy stuff on there that you would never hear anywhere else. And so then that like fed into the same thing. And like I knew like I was super into Bon Scott AC/DC.
Yeah, me too.
In my mind, I was like, there's not a huge difference here.
Right.
Like it wasn't that far off from that stuff. And then the very end was when I saw Fear on Saturday Night Live. And I was like, that's it.
Right.
This is like, I don't know. Like if this is what punk rock is, then this is what I'm going to do with myself. And I started trying to find ways to find more punk rock.
Yeah. Sounds like you got into it earlier than I did, because I got into Devo and I was like, Devo's not punk rock. Punk rock is stupid. Yeah. Like I just, I didn't, like I said, I didn't get it. And when I got it, it was like, when I got into punk, it changed the kind of person I was. Like felt like I had this moment where it was like, my style changed. I became like who I was supposed to be, kind of. And it's like in high school, I wasn't, style wise, I wasn't really comfortable. I never really knew how I was supposed to look. And once I got into punk, it's like, oh, I found my identity. This totally resonates with me. But in high school, I was into like, what was it? My three favorite bands were Devo, AC/DC, and Rush. Those are my three favorite bands.
Those
Which
are
are totally
very different bands.
So I was into eclectic stuff. I just was like, I was super like snobby and picky. It's just, I don't know. I was just an asshole like that. But I like, I, I started with regular rock and roll, but then I was like, I wanted something more. So I got into prog. I tried to get into prog, and most of the prog bands I couldn't get into, but I got into like Yes, and I got into Rush. I love Rush.
I do too. I love Rush too.
They're a great band. So it's like I was looking for that different thing, but I just wouldn't let punk in because it seemed like, prog was like, okay, these guys are playing really difficult stuff. So
yeah, it's
like
I can the height of musicianship.
Right.
And punk is like, we don't want to have anything to do with something. It's like the difference between like a Mercedes Benz and a rat rod. Like a rat rod is take everything off that is not going to make it go faster.
Right.
And let's do this. And then, Mercedes is like, we want it to be luxurious.
Right.
All the little bells and whistles. I will say one thing that I know about you from our online, connection is you saying that Devo and Rush and AC/DC were like your three bands. It makes perfect sense why you love No Means No so much.
Yeah.
They are kind of exactly that. All those bands in one band.
I never thought of that. That's so true. I don't think anybody's ever put those three together and said that's kind of No Means No. Like, that's
they
funny.
play weird music like Devo. They play fast, loud music like AC/DC, and they are masters of their instruments like Rush. Like,
yeah, I mean, to me, they are always like punk Rush. I mean, but they even, I've never heard any of the guys from No Means No talk about Rush at all. So it's like, I know it's like a no-no if you're a punk rocker to be into Rush, but actually, my punk friend Christian from high school that got me into punk, he was always into Rush. He was, open-minded in that way.
Their lyrics are super punk.
Oh, totally.
All their lyrics are about individualism.
Yeah, totally. yeah. So they're just, and they're smart, it's like, I don't know. I got into them early and I never got out of them.
Yeah, they're one of those bands that they were never in my sphere. And then I would hear them sometimes and I'd be like, God damn, this band is good. And then I would have friends who like worship them. And so I was exposed. And every time I have, to this very day that I hear No Means No, I'm like, oh my God, these guys can play. They're like, to me, they're kind of, I'm not making a sound comparison, but musicianship wise, they remind me kind of like Bad Brains, who were like insanely skilled musicians.
Right.
But No Means No, like Bad Brains kind of stripped it out of what they were doing. They were just so good they could play faster than everybody else. Really, really good. But No Means No's music's like it's super complex music. And I need to spend more time with them. I need to go down a hole with No Means No.
Oh, you so do.
Because I know my love for them is there. I just need to.
I could say the same thing about Bad Brains. It's like, I know.
I'm not a super huge Bad Brains fan. To be honest.
I mean, there's a lot of,
but I don't love them.
Yeah, there's a lot of bands like that I just wasn't listening at the right time. It's like you kind of have to listen at the right time to really get them into you. You have to be a certain age and like get into it for that lifelong commitment. But it's like, I know they're a great band. I've seen the HR documentary, and it's like, HR stayed at one. I think my guy I was at a band with in Pedro one time stayed at his house. It's like during a tour or something. So it's like I don't know. It's like it was part of the scene. I just never, I never bought an album.
Right. I think I maybe had a cassette or two that I inherited. I don't know if I ever spent money. Oh, that's not true. There was a couple records in the late 80s like quickness that I definitely paid money for. For sure.
That's good.
When they
That's
started
good.
getting a little more metal, I like was like, yeah, this shit's killer.
Right.
But the Bad Brains are, I mean, they're,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they're a legendary band. They're fantastic.
Amazing.
And I love
They're amazing,
them.
but
And
it's like,
without them, I wouldn't have had Minor Threat. And
right.
that's my favorite hardcore band for sure.
Yeah.
And
that was another one of the first. It was like Dead Kennedys and Minor Threat and Circle Jerks. These are all bands that my friend Christian like made a cassette tape for me. And he wrote,
exactly.
so cool. He made this compilation just for me, and then he wrote all the lyrics out on this big piece of paper that folded up, so you could fold it up like it was a poster size paper. And then he wrote the name of the band, and then he wrote little like notes about them. Like he got Minor Threat. I remember he's like, truly the black sheep of punk rock. And then he did the lyrics for the song. It's like, that's how I learned about punk. And that's how I was like, oh, I get it now,
Yeah. For me, it was almost identical where like, I was a pretty good goalie in ice hockey. So I would, every other season I would
That's another reason you should like No Means No, because they're Canadian. They have a band second band called the Hanson Brothers, which does.
I did not know those were related, and I totally know the Hanson Brothers.
Okay. Anyway, sorry.
And so I would play up a division with kids older than me, like every other season. And so one season, my goalie partner, who was like 2 years older than me, would be your age. Mm-hmm. He was like totally into like all those bands. And like, he came from a decent family and he could buy whatever he wanted. So he had all the records and all the tapes, like of all the big hardcore bands. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I remember talking to him being like, oh yeah, like I like that band Fear. I saw them on Saturday Night Live. I loved it. It was so cool. Cause the night that I saw Fear on Saturday Night Live, I was actually at a hockey sleepover with all the kids from my team. Mm-hmm. And it was like on Halloween. So it was like a Halloween thing. And I remember like that Fear came on and they were all like, ew, this sucks. Like, and they wanted to turn it. And I was just like, laser focused. I was like, no, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life.
See, I was one of the kids that would have been like, "Ew, this sucks. Change the channel," because I wasn't there yet.
And so, like, a year or two later, when I was on my team with my friend Greg, and he was like, "Oh." He's like, that's all I listen to is like punk rock. I'll make you a cassette. And so he made me a cassette of like, it was, one side was Dead Kennedys, In God We Trust. The other side was, Wild in the Street, Circle Jerks. And then he made another one that was Black Flag Damaged. And then I think in the most random of randoms, the other side of that was Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance, which I liked Judas Priest at the time. And I actually, random that they come up, but I was listening to Judas Priest before I came out here to
there
start. You go. I love it. But yeah, I spent a lot of time not liking heavy metal in the 80s when punk rock and heavy metal hadn't quite become friends yet.
Yeah. I never
it was nice for me to go back to being able to like heavy metal,
That's the cool thing about getting older is you just it's like, fuck all that.
Well, the crossover thing happened too, right? Where you got Metallica showed up and then it was like, oh, like we can like Slayer, Venom, Metallica, and Iron Maiden. Right. Like those are all punk cleared heavy metal bands, and then it just kept growing from there. Then it was like, oh, then we added Metallica. It's
funny though. It's like you need kids. You need permission. It's like but the thing that's great about getting older. I mean, really older, like our age. It's like you just all that shit just goes away, and you realize how stupid it is, and you can just like whatever you like, and then you just have so much more things to enjoy.
Yeah, for me, it's jazz. Like jazz has been like a huge thing for the last couple years. Like,
what kind of jazz?
Like Miles Davis and like Charlie Parker and Mingus and
it's amazing. It's
even
amazing.
down to like Dave Brubeck. Dave Brubeck's kind of like, for crackers or whatever it is, like the white,
it's awesome though.
Like the most white person version of jazz ever, but it's amazing. Like Take Five.
Great.
If you can't enjoy the song Take Five, I don't think you like music in general. It's just a fantastic song. but yeah, that's like been a big one for me. Is I, 20 years ago, I would have been like, I'm not listening to that for
Right.
any reason, but I still can't get on board with reggae or country music. So,
Well, I have to say, I
or
can
I'm not a
appreciate.
fan of ska punk either. Like
That's my
Rancid's about it for me.
right. No, that's funny because that's what my kid has. He's in a traditional ska band, like traditional 60s.
Traditional's a little different than
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Real Big Fish or
Yeah,
whatever.
totally, totally. Yeah, I think they would say the same for sure. They get really, if I ever say, yeah, my kid's in a ska band, and he hears me, he's like, six traditional ska band. There's a difference, but there's like a whole traditional ska scene. It's
Sure.
crazy, like huge in Mexico. They go
Oh,
on tour
yeah.
in Mexico, and it's like
East LA too.
yeah,
even,
there's a huge Hispanic community. It's totally into it. It's such a weird little thing. I would have never thought in a million years, but I mean, it's like I never got into reggae. But it's like all these types of music. I still could appreciate them, and
Sure.
there's definitely some reggae songs I love, and
I'm not sure if there's any
what
I
about
could say that I love.
okay, what about this is a Paul Simon song, so you might hate it for that reason.
No,
But
I love Paul Simon.
okay,
Man.
Mother and Child Reunion.
Yeah, that's a great song.
That's like got a reggae vibe, and it's got
sure.
it's got reggae players in it. That's why it sounds reggae. It's like people from I forget who's Bob Marley's band or some famous reggae band he had for that.
Well, then in the 80s, I can't. One of my problems when I'm podcasting is that I can't bring up names
I know,
very quickly.
Terrible.
The record he did in the mid 80s that had Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes and I Can Call You Betty, You Can Call Me.
Oh yeah, Graceland.
Graceland. That's all like reggae players on it too. That record is in 1985. It was the antithesis of everything I wanted to know about life, and I would have never spent any time listening to it. And as an adult, I listened to that record, and I'm like, this is a piece of music genius. This record, totally. It's such a great record. It's like
hard to.
It's adult music.
yeah, exactly. And at the time, it was hard for me at the time it came out. Although I bought it even when it came out.
I think my dad had it.
It's hard to it was hard for me to fully get behind it because it was commercial. Mm-hmm. It was so commercial, and you'd see all like video with Chevy Chase in it, and it's like at the time, I was just like, so anti that, but that's almost becomes like a barrier to truly appreciating it for what it is.
That's a fantastic record. If anybody listening has never listened to it, listen to it.
Great. It's got amazing bass playing on it.
Yeah, the playing on it is insane. Yeah, it's insane. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, it's one of the things that obviously I have a lot of people on my show who are of a similar age and come from, similar background, artists and musicians and stuff. And it's funny how many times the same stories, the same experiences get shared between me and a guest or somebody I'm talking to. I love it. It's like there's a lot of things that having a podcast will give you. And my favorite one for sure is new friends, everybody I talk to, I consider to be my friend afterwards.
Right. Yeah. And it's a trip.
But the other one is just like that shared sense of community with people who are like you, like who share your common experience, whether it's, having to do one kind of art until you can start making enough money to do the kind of art you want to make, or whether it's, how you grew up around music and stuff like that. That's awesome. I love these conversations there.
Oh yeah. Or,
they're like my favorite.
Yeah. Also the I don't know, the artist trajectory of people that were into it since they were kids is usually very similar. It's
absolutely.
Like I was the art kid at school. That's how I got my identity, and I just kept building on that. And there's the magazines, comics and stuff. It's like it's very specific and similar.
Yeah, I never got the comic, but I never got bit by the comic bug.
Not even heavy metal.
Yeah, but that was more of a magazine for me than it was like a comic book. I think here's what I would say. I have not even the horror comics. I have a very specific thing about comic books. And that is from a very young age. I am very just as who I am, and it's been inside of me my whole life. I'm very sensitive to feeling like I've been taken advantage of. And so with comic books, for me, it was always like I love the cover, and then I get inside and they didn't spend as much time on the inside as they did on the outside. And I'd be like, it kind of felt, and this is just me personally. I love that people love anything that they love, and comics included. But I did it. If I was in the grocery store with my mom when I was 7 years old and I was needing to get something for myself to feel that I need something, and I would go over to the comic book rack, it was always like a horror comic. Like I never bought superhero comics. I didn't care about any of the superheroes when I was a little kid.
I tried to get in. Like I bought Plastic Man one time, and it's like I tried getting into like Spider-Man. I couldn't do it. It was horror comics, but horror comics were just like, I'm there, man. Even at DC did that one called Tales of the Zombie, I think, which was there, and it was a zombie that I just thought was so cool. I somehow got the old EC comics from maybe my brother or something, or my cousins, but I wound up with a bunch of those, and those were just like it for me, And then a friend's dad had Creepy and Airy that we weren't supposed to get into, but we got into, and that was just like that changed everything for me. Those were the kind of comics I was into.
Yeah, I in the neighborhood I grew up in, I was like on the younger side, so I got a lot of hand-me-down stuff from older kids, games, toys, GI Joe stuff, good 12-inch GI Joe stuff, board games, all kinds of stuff like that. So I would get comic books every now and then, and it was like always like sift through them and be like, I'll keep the war comics because they were, I think maybe there was some part of me that was like, I don't care about a longer narrative about a character. Like I want to read what I'm reading and then it can be done.
Right.
But as an adult, there have been a few comic series over the years, but again, they're kind of in that same vein. Like I liked Evil Ernie. I think I maybe collected Evil Ernie comics for a little while. Yeah. And then like anything that Jeff Darrow illustrates, I will own and buy because the inside is just as good as the outside. Yeah. Jeff Darrow's, he's in my top 10 illustrators for sure, and like,
I don't know that name.
He did Hard Boiled.
Jeff Darrow. Let's see. I'm looking him up. Oh yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, the Hard Boiled detective comic that he did like this Hard Boiled series, and it's like when I first moved to LA in the mid 90s, I went into
I've seen
Lalou's, and there's that image of the cop that's been like hit with shrapnel from an exploding car, and he's got a license plate in his shin, and like there was like a big sculpture of that in like gold apple or something.
Oh wow.
And I was like, oh holy shit, what's that? And then I asked, and they sent me to the spot, and I bought those books, and like even now I've recently bought them all back as hard cover editions and stuff, and so stuff like that I always really loved, like I really like when there's one of my influences, obviously, which was an influence on a lot of us from that time, was Pusshead, and like it was there was always tons of detail in all of his work. And so that satisfied that thing inside of me. It was like, I want all of the art to be all like cover quality.
Right.
And then I was never good at making comic art. And so that was another reason why I was like, man.
I really think that the big thing for me was I couldn't get into the costumes. I couldn't get into the costumes seemed like Superman, and Spider-Man was okay. I mean, I was Spider-Man for Halloween one time when I was a little kid, and I used to shoot people with webs, of course, when I was like 5 years old. But it was like I couldn't. It wasn't like occulty or supernatural enough for me. It's like I wanted that.
That's fair.
supernatural element for some reason. I was even at an early age. It's like, and so all the horror stuff was like, I'm there.
Well, there are superhero people, there are horror people, and there are sci-fi people. Sometimes
Right.
they all meet,
Mm,
but
yeah.
but I think people are drawn to particular things. And like I was never really a super huge sci-fi person. And I was never really a superhero person. I was definitely like when I was from the time I was boy, once I kind of got over having my entire room decorated in hockey stuff or Star Wars stuff,
Mhm.
and Star Wars is a thing that isn't part of my universe anymore. Like it was
Same
like
here.
I
Yeah.
grew out of it, and once I did, I grew all the way
Same
out
here.
of it.
Same here. I was like way into it. Like every boy our
Sure.
age was into it, but I never like went back. Like I don't know why, because it's great. It's great. I just never.
I mean, I have some personal feelings about why I don't like it as an adult, but that is a whole nother
Yeah.
deep conversation.
Yeah.
But I was a horror movie kid. Like I all the books I had were like about horror films, and
Yeah, same here.
it was like
There was a
like
lot of them back then too.
a lot of sharks. I was super obsessed with sharks when I was a little
Yep.
kid, but by the time I was old enough to start doing my own thing in my own bedroom, it was like I was just buying Fangoria magazine and all of those horror magazines, and my walls were tiled with horror stuff out of magazines. And then skateboarding happened, and then it was like an equal amount of horror stuff and skateboarding, and then punk rock happened, and then it was like punk flyers, and like my walls were they were completely tiled with tiny little cutouts of everything. And when I moved out of my parents' house, they were like, "Oh, you're not done here until you've completely taken everything off of those walls and respackled everything, because there's 10 million staple holes in our wall."
Yeah.
I was like,
I used to throw darts on my wall. I don't know how my mom let us get away with this, but I had my bedroom door was covered with stickers, like wacky packages,
Sure.
and any weird sticker I could find. I mean, it was covered. And it's like I don't think I let my kids do that.
I
was
had
the 70s though, so
once I was in my teen years, like it was my windows, like every punk rock sticker I could get, I would cover my windows with so I could keep it dark in there. Because when you're 16 years old, that's all you want to do is be in the dark in your room.
Yeah.
And then I started, bottle caps will stick perfectly into popcorn ceilings. And so I started like painting like Roth style eyeballs on beer bottle caps and like stick them in my ceiling. So the ceiling was just a bunch of bloodshot eyeball stuff. And then one of the things that one of the limits that I reached with my parents was I had a friend at Tower Records. They used to do those very elaborate displays for DVD or VHS launches, and there was one for the movie Aliens, part 2. And they made like an actual like 3-dimensional version, like paper mache version of the little girl Newt. She had like, the pink sweatshirt and the overalls and the whole 9 yards. And I was leaving Tower one day after buying, Slayer records or something. And it was in the trash. And I was like, wow, that's coming with me. And so I pulled it out of the trash and I took it home and I stuck it in a doll sized chair that my sister had, she was older than me. So she was done with it. And I ripped the head off of it and I stuck a life-size skull model I had on top, and then threw a wig on top of it. So it looked like I had this dead child in my room.
Amazing.
And my parents are like, because my dad would walk by my room and the door would be open. He'd be like, oh, would get him. And so he's like, I don't know, man. I don't know if this is, and then I made it worse by, when Nightmare on Elm Street 2 came out on video, I was working in a mall and the video store like had a life-size cutout of Freddy. And I went in, I was like, hey, I want that when you guys are done with it. And they're like, well, they sent us like 4 of them. Do you want one? And I was like, yeah. So they
Wow.
gave me one in box, and like
Oh
I
my
stuck
God.
that right behind her, so it was like there's a man in your room. There's like yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like something I would have done. My mom talks about that in the documentary, how I used to just drag shit home all the time and be like, why do you have this big piece of concrete? I'm gonna make something out of it. Just like junk.
Dude, totally.
I gotta say this. This is a technical thing, but your voice, it's like it's at the kind of the normal, good loud level, and then it drops a little bit every once in a while.
Huh.
Then it kind of comes back, almost like it's a loose connection. But I don't know. It's
That's weird.
probably not something that Well,
When I was editing audio the other day, last night, I was
I just did
noticing
it.
it's I was
Like you were a little low and then jumped up.
oh, you just did it.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Oh shit.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Is it to the point where you can't hear me?
No.
Okay.
It's one of those things that if you equalize or whatever, it's probably fine.
Yeah, I'll
let it-
run a filter over it.
Sorry
But
to interrupt the flow.
No, it's totally fine, man. It's totally fine. Yeah, like I have not seen that documentary that guy did.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no.
I'll have to
Is
send
it
you one.
available streaming anywhere or?
Yeah, it's on Apple TV streaming. That's the only place it is
Okay.
right now. But
I think I have that.
I can send you a DVD if you have a DVD player still. But we're just talking. Mike just CC'd me on an email talking to the distributor, and we're going to try and get it on a couple other services.
It seems like it would be pretty easy to get it on Prime. They'll put anything on Prime.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to say that yours isn't worth being on Prime, but I've seen
they don't pay
stuff on
shit
Prime.
either. That's why the distributor didn't want to put it on Prime. So
of course they don't.
Yeah, because they literally will put anything up there. But I don't care at this point. I just want people to see it because it's good. It came out. I mean, you'll see. It's really good. It's a really good movie, especially for something that was totally done independently of anything other than Mike and I and Kickstarter. It's like came out great. Really came out great.
Well,
People love
good
it.
to hear.
Haven't gotten a bad review from anybody yet.
Because some of them about people who deserve to have stellar, like the Tales of the Rat Inc. That as much as I love Ed Roth and he's in my top 5 favorite artists ever.
I know.
Like it was not
trying to
good.
place it. I'm trying to place it.
It was a valiant effort, and you could tell that whoever did it put every single amount of love they could into it with the money and resources they had. So you could see that it wanted to be, but it just suffered from. It was almost like they just took his books and like made like a slideshow kind of film out of it, and it was narrated by John Goodman, so it's like like it just it was. I hope at some point they do some. He gets a proper documentary.
Yeah,
I really liked
2006, so that's old. I mean, that's
I hope that I like the Robert Williams one. I hope they do a better one of Robert Williams, and then at some point, I hope that somebody spends $10 million and makes a Frank Frazetta one worthy of Frank Frazetta.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so. What's the Painting with Fire? That's another one that's like kind of just a victim of being old. It's like before all the good equipment was cheap, and I still like it. I mean, I watch it and I enjoy it, but I know what you're saying as far as like structure. There's like there's really great documentaries that just like take you through a journey, and that one I think is maybe a little more like some of the ones you're describing are maybe more like they just like scene. They're not totally like integrated. They're it's just like random shit put together.
Yeah. I mean, I think they need to make a biopic about Frank Frazetta.
Oh, totally, man.
I mean,
they did one about Beksinski. You know Beksinski?
Yeah. Did they do a biopic of his?
It's not technically. It's about his family. It's just about his family. It's about him as an artist. It's not like his rise to fame, but it's a Polish film. It's really good because his son, had mental illness, and
Mm.
killed himself, and then his wife had cancer, and just it's more about the family than it is about him. It's really unusual, but it's
Oh,
great. It's
I want to see
great.
that.
You
I'm
gotta
gonna,
see,
I want to
you
see
gotta
that.
see it. You gotta see it. It's like I don't remember how I
Well,
saw
he's like in your list of favorites, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
His
hell
work's
yeah.
amazing. Like the sense of scale he gets is like, I don't think there's
Yeah.
anybody else that I've ever seen where you're looking at it and then you notice some detail and you're like, oh my God, that thing's as big as a skyscraper.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a million things to love about him too. Just the quality. It's like he did so many masterpieces. Usually artists
Mhm.
have like a few masterpieces and then they have great work, but then they have these standout ones. And it's like most of them are masterpieces, I think. And then he's got a couple of weird ones, but it's so prolific and just so unique and amazing.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like if I'm thinking about like like the greatest American painters, I think, Norman Rockwell and Frank Frazetta are like, for me, they, as far as painters that America has turned out, I
Yeah.
don't know that there's too many people that are better than that, than those two
Yeah.
guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
No.
there's fancy pants painters and there's, portrait painters and there's, pop artists and all these other things. But when you sit down and look at a Frank Frazetta painting or a Norman Rockwell painting,
Yeah.
no other artist painter that I've ever seen from the American landscape will suck you in like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of those guys though, like Wyeth. It's like people that influenced Frazetta that are also amazing. And some of those.
Well, wasn't your stepdad one of those guys?
He was a painter. Yeah. He was
But he
like
did stuff kind of Wyeth and Vallejo like ish, right?
Yeah, yeah, he did. No, I've Wyeth was why am I getting Wyeth?
I'm thinking of I am confusing you. Wyeth did those like figurative landscapes where it would be like a farm and a meadow with a girl sitting in it. I was thinking of Whalen. Sorry,
Wayland, right? Okay,
Michael
okay,
Whalen.
yeah,
I was
okay.
getting them confused.
I like Michael Whalen, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I was thinking like Howard Pyle, those old and NC Wyeth, I think.
Yeah, Wyeth. Yeah,
Yeah, no, my
his work's
dad's
amazing, of course, but
oh yeah. I mean, there's just when you look at it, there's so many amazing painters. It's really hard to
yeah.
but Frazetta for sure and Norman Rockwell absolutely a cut above. I mean, amazing shit. Two of my favorites.
One of the things that Frazetta was really good at, and it's a thing that you are also very good at, and it's a thing that I admire about painters that I've never been able to really grasp how to do really well, is like if you look at a Frank Frazetta painting, like Death Dealer, and that horse is standing on a pile of rocks. But when you look at the pile of rocks, it's just a bunch of fucking scribbles.
I know,
and it's like,
amazing.
how do you you do that in your paintings?
I try to
in your
do it, and sometimes I do it, and sometimes I'm successful. It's easier to kind of like paint everything until it looks really good, and tight. And it's like, I don't want to do that. And sometimes I'm able to do it. Sometimes I'm not, but he was like the master. Like you see the underpainting showing through and like the rough sketch. It's like, I love that. And then you have the main part of the Death Dealer that's just like super polished. It's so amazing.
That is a skill. That is a skill. That is just amazing. Your alarm went off. Do you have to take off?
No. Yeah, that was something I already did.
Oh, okay. My mentor that I met in the video game industry, who he got out to be a full-time illustrator painter, is a guy named James Ryman. And he does like
James Ryman. I know that name.
Yeah, you've seen his work for sure.
Yeah.
He does a lot of stuff nowadays for like, Magic the Gathering and Warhammer and stuff like that. But he's
great.
He's like, I was insanely fortunate to work under him for a number of years, and any skill I have as an artist was born of things I learned from being around him, because I would work on paintings and take him to work and he would help me, he'd be like,
cool.
okay, he would like this is what you could have done or whatever. And, you know, he's one of those guys who's like, you would sit there and watch him and he was like an A+ animator. And he was like an A+ 3D modeler, and he was an A+ oil painter, and an A+.
One of those freaks.
Yeah, he was totally that guy.
Freaks.
And just, you know, super nice guy. His wife babysat my kids and stuff. Like our families were friends, but he's back in England now, and he just does his thing. But yeah, like him, like he gifted me a couple books, this massive Norman Rockwell book. It's like that big one that weighs like fucking 30 pounds. And it's like, you can't, it doesn't fit in any box. It doesn't fit on any bookshelf, but I'm never getting rid of it.
Right.
But you know, like things like he'd have a Frazetta book and be like, oh yeah, I have an extra one of these. Like you can have this. And he'd like show me like, see these things, like notice these things. And it was always for me, like that ability to detail the area where you want the viewer to look, but still have the non-detailed parts look right.
I know. I know.
Such an amazing skill.
And the other thing is they make it, especially particularly Frazetta and the underpainting kind of showing through. It's like the good painters, they make it look like they just did it, you know, carelessly. Yeah, I do this. Sometimes I'll make a painting that's a masterpiece. You know, like reading a book in one hand. They make it just look like you can do it too. That's like with anything, like great musicians too. That's the thing about like Geddy Lee. I'm such a huge Geddy Lee fan of his bass playing. It's like he makes it look like I could do that, and then I go and I get on a bass and I can't do it.
Well, I think that, you know, the thing about Rush, I think it universal is people either like his voice or they don't, and that's always like if you took him out of every song, anybody who likes rock music would be like, yes, this is amazing, and then either you like my wife does not like Rush because she doesn't like Geddy Lee, but I love, like, I'm fine with the way he sings and it doesn't bother me. So I'm cool with Rush, but like that has always kind of been the thing with Rush, I think. And I think it, you know, there's other bands that are like that too, where it's like you either, one of the things going back a little bit to Dead Kennedys is like, I can't listen to him anymore because of Jella's voice. It's like when it was like the greatest thing ever when I was a kid, like now I'm like, no, I can't do it very often. Yeah. I can't do it very often. You know, maybe some of still the early stuff, but like as things went on and he sang a little bit more, it kind of lost me a little bit.
What era are you talking about?
Like anything after, like from Give Us Liberty or Give Us Convenience or Give Us Death, or I think that was that record.
That was like a B-sides compilation. Are you talking about Bad Time for Democracy?
Yeah,
maybe?
probably. Yeah, the one. Yeah. And then anything he's kind of done since, like the stuff he did. What was it? Did he did stuff with No Means No?
Yeah, he did a great album with them. I love that album.
Yeah, like I don't know. There's something about his voice just didn't like. It doesn't stick with me.
Yeah.
And
I never really had a problem with it. I always thought his voice was, I mean, when I wasn't into punk, I thought it sounded like, you know, I used to think when I was younger, I'd heard before I got into punk, I would hear bits and pieces of Dead Kennedys here and there because they had, you know, Holiday in Cambodia and stuff that was like on K-Rock. And I remember thinking he sounded like one of those old fashioned crooner guys from like the 40s. They used to do that really, you know, heavy on the vibrato, like overdoing it, you know, and it's like, so I get it. Maybe why aesthetically it might be kind of, I don't know. I actually, it's funny because, you know, you think of these punk musicians as like maybe not super technically skilled, but I got to see him. I got to meet him and hang out with him a few times.
I met him and hung out with him once too.
Oh, cool.
I ended up in a van with him, like on a kind of semi-long van trip, like in the back of the VW van with him. He was an interesting guy.
Yeah, totally. But he's very interesting. I got to see them practice with the Melvins. And bring my son, which was cool, the musician. And I was there with him singing, and he would like in breaks, he was singing some of the lyrics to the band. and his voice is like, he fucking knows how to sing. Like he can project. It was just like totally the diaphragm, totally like a professional singer. I was like, damn. You know, you think Jello's this punk rocker who didn't have any formal training, but his voice sounded so powerful that it was like, oh, he's singing properly, like Whitney Houston or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think
So
the only thing I loved that he did after DK was the large stuff he did with Ministry. God, those records are fucking awesome.
I particularly like one. There's one that I own that I listen to a lot, which is Last Temptation of Reed. It's that one Lard album that's got Pineapple Face and Fork Boy, the one that was in Natural Born Killers. That's the one. That album is just so good.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah. The other singer that I can't do a lot of time with anymore is fucking King Diamond.
Oh, I never got into King Diamond, but it's funny because
when I was a kid, but now I'm listening to him, I'm like, okay, all right.
My punk friends in high school were into King Diamond.
Well, yeah, Merciful Fate was another one of those approved bands.
Yeah, right.
And then the list just kept growing until we got, speed metal, thrash metal, crossover. Yeah. Which was the time I was like in a kind of crossover band when I was in the 80s when I was in high school. And like literally half the band were like the guitar players and the drummer were like heavy metal guys. And me and the bass player were like from the skate punk scene. And one of the guitar players rode that line. He was the guy who like had Slayer records before anybody had ever heard of Slayer. Like we went over to his house and like somebody was like, oh, you guys are starting a band. You should talk to my friend Jeff. And we went over to his house. Shout out Jeff Langhans. And he was like, and it was like, he had like, like Motorhead records and he had, records from like Raven and like all these like, Alcatraz and, and then he had like Adolescence records and, Black Flag records. And he was like this like total Hesher dude who also liked, like hardcore punk. And we were like, yeah, you should be in our band. And then we just like, he's like, oh, the kid who lives across the street's like a metal guy. He plays guitar. You should get him. And then we just put this band together. And it was like, it was like the perfect timing thing of like when a lot of that was happening. It was like, what
was the name of the band?
No Warning.
No Warning.
Yeah. And, we got to the point where it was like, we were just about to like start looking like we were talking to record labels and there was going to be touring going on. And that like, once we were kind of all out of like high school, the summer after high school was like, things started going places. And then I had a kid and it was over. I left. Yeah. I had to go like be a dad,
Yeah. Right. Yep. That'll do it.
Yeah. And then, a label put out an anthology of all of our stuff that we'd released. And,
oh, that's cool.
Like, oh God, I guess that was like in 2000. And then, and then I didn't do music. I didn't play in bands or do anything other than art for bands until 2008 or 9 when I got divorced. And I got divorced in 2007. And then, my kids were old enough where I could have some kind of life of my own. And my friends were like, all my death metal and grindcore friends are like, you want to start like a crusty D-beat band? You should sing. You're like the old guy who used to be in a hardcore band. I was like, okay, I'll do it. and then I got to like, travel around the country and the world,
really
putting out records and doing everything I missed.
What band is this? What's the name of this band?
They're still going with the singer that replaced me. They're called DIS. The longer name is Destroyed in Seconds. But like I was in the original lineup.
Wow. That's cool.
It was like Leon Del Muerte from Exhumed and Impaled and a bunch of other bands, Intronaut, members from Phobia, grindcore band, Eat the Living, death metal band. Like, it was like a side project that turned into a full-time project for everybody. Right. But it's cool. Like, we did US tour, we did European tour, festivals and stuff. It was super, super fun. I was just too old to manage touring. Like it was just brutal, dude.
This is when from like age, I think 17 to I don't know, 27, 28, I was trying to make it in bands. Like seriously, that's what I wanted to do. And we had a really good band called Skin Horse in San Pedro.
Oh,
That
I
was
know Skin Horse.
really.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
do you know
yeah, yeah.
Skin Horse? Nobody knows Skin Horse.
You know,
We were
I was in Los Angeles in the mid '90s.
yeah, we used to play the Anti Club all the time, and we were on a compilation, Brain Cookies, on KXLU. It was a radio show on KXLU, and so we did get on that. But anyway, and then that band fell apart, and then I started another band, and that band got really good too, and then it broke up. So it was like 10 years, and I was like so disheartening. I was like, I'm quitting, man. I'm fuck this shit. I'm gonna get into computers animation. I started getting really into 3D animation and stuff.
That was my core job when I was in the games industry.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I got way into it. I was so into it, and it was so hard to quit that, to leave music. And but like looking at it now, I'm so glad I didn't make it. Because aside from the fact that the music industry took a huge dump and just got leveled, I'm like the last person that would want to tour. I hate traveling. It's like I don't want to go anywhere.
This goes back to the initial conversation we were having about not wanting to go anywhere, do anything.
So it's like I couldn't have done that, man. No way. I'm such a homebody. No way. So it's one of those things where you think you know what you want, or you think you know what you should be doing, but you don't really know what you should be doing. You especially when you have, like you said, like when you have a lot of interests, it's hard to know what to focus on.
Well, when you were doing 3D animation stuff, did you do a lot of stuff for Tool with that? Like you worked with Tool on a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm aware.
Yeah, I started doing 3D animation because back in maybe early mid early 90s, 93, 94, the place I was working, my boss hired this 3D guy because we were going to try and because Jurassic Park came out, and we were going to try and move with the times. And so he set up this computer department, and this guy was this Lightwave guy, and so I learned Lightwave. That was my software. Everyone makes fun of Lightwave now, but it's like it was, it had a great modeler. I think it's an awesome program. So I did
that ran on an SGI machine, right?
No, it was an Amiga. It was from the Video Toaster originally, and it was on the Amiga.
Right.
And then it would be on, and then it was on like Windows NT. You ran it on Windows NT. You remember these?
Yeah. Because for some reason I was thinking that Lightwave was somehow connected to and now I can't come up with the word. It was one of the first pieces I used on an SGI. It was it wasn't Lightwave. It was I can't remember. Anyway,
these are these $100,000 computers, the SGI computers, right?
Yeah, they were super expensive. And then it was like I went over to 3D Studio Max and then Maya, and then when I left the industry, it was like the last couple projects were done on Maya, so it was kind of a Maya character animator for a long time.
Wow, that's cool. Well, what kind of? Well, let me finish the story.
Yeah, sorry,
first.
I interrupted.
No. I'm curious with what you were doing because I'm really interested in that stuff. But I started it because it was like I could make short movies, like my own movies, because I was always interested in making movies. Even when I was a kid, I was making Super 8 films, and so I was like, I could make these little movies. So I did these weird looping, creepy animations, and then Adam, my friend, the guitar player for Tool, saw one of them. He's like, "Oh, can we use that for a Tool show?" And I was like, "Sure." So I think they still use it. I mean, I know, I don't know if they use it regularly, but it comes out once in a while. But so then he hired me to do some more stuff, and I did a bunch of other animations for them and some t-shirt stuff, like still digital stuff. But anyway, what did you work on? What were you doing?
I mean, none of the games I ever worked on amounted to much of anything. Like I don't think I've worked on too many games that people would even really know. I did some stuff for N64 that did okay. Like we did a version. Remember that game Robotron?
Yeah.
from the arcades. We did like
Oh,
a
I used to- yeah, I used
Robotron
to play that.
64 for the N64. I worked on that.
How would that be 3D animation? What did they did a 3D version of Robotron? Because that was like little. It was like Pong basically. With
well, you
like,
were in a room with a bunch of like robots, right? And you had to like
Yeah.
shoot all the robots to get
yeah,
out
but
of the
they were
room.
just like little lines in the
well.
original arcade version. Remember?
The thing that was cool about Robotron 64 is the N64 controller. If you remember, had a little joystick. You could use both controllers and control the shooting with one controller and your movement with the other. So you could like run around.
Right.
It was like super high paced, intense, and like they dump you into an arena and they dump a bunch of robots in there, and it was cool. It was a good game.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I worked on a galactic bowling game called Milo's Astro Lanes for the N64, which I did all the character animation for.
Oh wow.
Like Blues Brothers 2000. Like the Legendary Adventures of Hercules game.
Wow.
And
That's cool. I mean, that must have been a kind of a cool job. I thought about getting into.
I never liked the game industry. It was exactly kind of, I think, a lot of the issues you had with the film industry, where it was like, it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And it was something that, because I went to animation school briefly. And I had those skills. And when I would, it's been discussed on the show before, but my dad was a repo man and the family business was repossession. So my first real job was a repo man.
Oh my God.
And I kind of knew that I didn't want to do that forever. And so I started.
So I'd be way too scared to do that.
Yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't great.
I'm way too chicken.
Well, it's one of those jobs where 99% of the time it's the easiest job you could ever do. And then the 1% of the time it isn't.
Yeah, when the guy comes out with a sawed-off shotgun.
Yeah, you might die in 1% of the time. Which makes it an interesting night every night.
Yeah.
But like I knew I had some art skills because my dad was like a pinstriper in the 60s, and my mom was an artist in kind of in the crafting world. But she actually ended up learning how to paint properly, and so she would properly paint her crafting projects. She's an amazing painter. My mom is super fucking rad. Cool. So I grew up in a family with artists. My uncle was a costume designer. He did stuff for David Bowie, and he did stuff in all kinds of stuff. Like I came from a very, very creative family. I came from a very diverse family, to be honest. It was, we had a little bit of everything. We had minorities, and we had, different genders, and we had different identities, and we had different, like everything from like conservative Republicans all the way down to actual hippies. And so the thing that I learned about life is that you can love people who aren't necessarily just like you. And that was what our family was. And so I'm extremely fortunate in that way.
It's reflected in what you do too. It's like you're super diverse in the kind of work you do. Seriously. It's like you do so many different things.
I do.
It's funny.
And partly to keep me interested, but so I just kind of knew that I could take the art skills I had, and video games were, they were still, pixel sprites and stuff. And like, in the early 90s, hadn't gone into 3D yet. And I was like, well, that's not that different than what I know how to do. And so I just started applying, and I got a job and worked my way up. And, the last game I worked on was a game called Freaky Creatures, and it was actually a really good game that had like a really high budget, and it was right at the time when online gaming was happening. So it was like 2009. And so World of Warcraft was like really big. And so it was a turn-based fighting game. But it came with an action figure. So you'd go to the store, you'd buy an action figure, cool. And then you'd get that character in game, and you could like get cards. So it had a card element where you'd get like add-on parts and weapons, and then you'd go into a lobby, you'd match up with somebody, you'd go and you'd do turn-based combat. And, it was really good, and the production values were fantastic, and it had a great budget, and it was going to be featured. Like there were plushies being made, like the whole 9 yards. And like it released the week of the major economic meltdown, and like, parents didn't have money for subscription based stuff, and it just never went anywhere, which is a bummer.
Yeah. That sucks.
So yeah, it was a bunch of that. The most successful game I ever worked on was NHRA drag racing, which sold primarily out of Walmart and like sold like hotcakes, which is
Wow.
fine because I'm a drag racing guy. So it was fine for me. But all the British like rally car guys are like, this isn't fun, mate. You go in a straight line.
I mean, I was like, I actually set up a small business. I was gonna try and do like commercial work, digital, mostly for like effects kind of stuff,
Uh-huh.
really for the film industry, and it just never took off. And it was, you know, and I kind of came to the point where it's like, this is just like makeup effects. This is, it's like just a different way of the same having the same problem in a way, you know. So that's when I ended up getting into painting after that was like, did the music thing, did the 3D thing, did the makeup effects thing, and I was still not satisfied. And then I got into fine art, and then I was like, this is what I need to be doing. And then I ended up fucking being like this business guy, you know, selling stuff in my web store. But I it's still better. It's the best. I love it. I'm not complaining at all.
With the pandemic stuff, do you have like what's going on with shows? Are that starting to come back? Are you working on pieces that you'll be able to do a show when things open back up? Or
Yeah, I mean,
we've hardly talked about your painting stuff.
well, I mean, they've still been doing shows that just people haven't been showing up. They're like, you know, they do virtual shows. They do it, you know, like limited crowds and stuff. But I curated a show actually right in the middle of it, and I didn't go to it because it's like I've been staying in.
What gallery was it at?
At Copro Gallery.
Oh, okay.
The Dark Art Society group show, 2nd one, I think it was. But you know, my income, I was never been able to support myself with just gallery shows. So the fact that I haven't been, it's like, you know, I wanted time off from gallery shows, because every year I've been doing a solo show, at least one, sometimes two back in the day, 2 solo shows a year.
Wow. That's a lot of paintings.
It's insane. I was killing myself. And so this last year I took off of doing solo shows, and was it the year before? Maybe not. Maybe it's just this last year. Because it's like they don't bring me that much money anyway. It's comparatively to what I need to make. It's like a small piece of this diverse puzzle. It's like print sales, conventions, which got knocked out, which is fine also because I was getting burnt out on those. So I've just been focusing on
selling prints.
Yeah, selling prints, commissions that I owe a lot of commissions. I'm working on this book I'm trying to get finished. So I've just been trying to catch up over the pandemic, which, you know,
the dreaded book project.
Oh my God,
that I need to do at some point. the guest whose episode comes out tomorrow on my show, Jermaine Rogers, and I had a good long conversation about the book.
Oh my God. Well, I have an art book from like 2012 or something. It's really good. It's great. I'm so super satisfied with it. I wasn't involved in it though. It was published. This one was like, you know, mythologizing my world that I paint, and then figuring out cross references of characters and territories they live in. And it's like,
oh wow, that sounds really cool.
It's cool. It's going to be amazing. It's just it's 4 years late. I was like, we did the Kickstarter in, oh God, I don't know. It's basically, I was like, estimated delivery, 6 months from now. Cause I just didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And it's like 4 years later, I'm like, God, the nightmare I can't get out of, but it's, it's coming along. It really is almost done. I mean, we've got like, I just saw a mock-up that has like 180 pages. So, I mean, it's gonna be cool.
Is it self-published, or is there a publisher?
Yeah, no, I'm publishing it.
Wow. Who published your last book?
Bain Art Books. They're a gallery in Australia, but they started as a book publisher, and they did I forget the names of the books. Metamorphosis. They did a series of like books of different, like, kind of dark, weird artists. And I was in one of those, or I was in a couple of those maybe. And then they did Laurie Lipton's book, and they did my book, and then they went out of business. So I kind of felt bad, like maybe my book didn't sell well enough to keep it afloat. But so I bought the rest of the books from them, so I sell them now.
That's awesome. I love it. I absolutely love it. Dude, this has been a super killer conversation. We've been going for like a long time. Like, what people after it's edited, what people won't understand is that me and Chet have been talking for 2 hours. The episode won't be 2 hours.
I wasn't even paying attention to the clock. So yeah,
like I'm looking
good
at
conversations.
We're at like 2:10.
Lose track of time. Okay, yeah, no, that was super fun.
Yeah, which is awesome. So, so for my listeners, Chet will be putting out this episode on his show, on his podcast, and I will be putting it out on mine. So there's like a cross promotional. So it's we're both getting an episode out of this discussion. So yeah, this has been fun talking to you, man. Like we talk online sometimes, and you know I've been a fan of your art forever. So
yeah, we've been friends on there forever. It seems
now to be a friend, and you know, like a friend is like I love that shit.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, it's funny because you know you have the I know you from, you know, talking on Facebook basically, but for kind of a long time. And then that picture you have, which is like one of my favorite memes of all time, of that kid, like annoyed kid. So it's like every time I see, you know, that's you to me, that kid. it's fucking hilarious.
I'm not kidding you. My mom asked me, she's like, is that a picture of you as a kid that I don't remember? That's so how much people associate the picture of that kid with me. Is that my mom didn't even, my mom didn't know. I'm like, Mom, he's wearing a SpongeBob shirt. I was 35 years old when SpongeBob came out.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Which is why it ended up having to be the logo for my show, right?
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So anyway, it was cool to, you know, see your real face and get to know you, and it's always great when you just click with the person. And
man, you know, this has been super fun, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, me too.
All right, man, cool. We'll talk again soon.
All right, thanks.